Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's Mike here at Game From Scratch, and one of the things I commonly see on this channel is why should I choose Godot over Unity or Unreal Engine? Both are available free, asterisk, so why would I choose Godot? And that's kind of what I'm going to try to answer in this post. Now I'm not saying that Godot is better or worse than Unity or Unreal Engine. That is simply not true, and anybody that tells you that X is worse than Y is generally a bit of an idiot. It all comes down to your particular needs and requirements, likes, and so on. And each one of these engines has its own strengths and weaknesses, so we're going to look at some of the reasons why you would particularly choose the Godot engine over Unity or Unreal. Now, with those two, I'm actually also working on a video for doing a direct head-to-head comparison, Unity versus Unreal, and why you should choose either one. Stay tuned for that, and I also did a video already on why you should or shouldn't choose Unity. I did that several months back. It needs to be updated, but I will link that down below. And I also link a text version of this if for some reason you want to read what I wrote and said here. Hey, you can. So without further ado, let us jump in. Now, again, a lot of this is straight out opinion based. I try to mark it as such when we get to it. But first, let's start with the very easy and obvious one. Godot is free. So obviously the lack of price is one of the most obvious features of Godot. Yes, you can start for free with both Unity and Unreal Engine, but both ultimately will have a price tag attached. With Unity, you pay on a per seat fee. So if you make over 100K a year total, you got to start licensing at the pro level. Plus you got splash screens, no dark mode, and a few other limitations. And it kind of, as you grow your team, Unity gets more expensive. For the Unreal Engine, it's a slightly different approach. You pay a 5% royalty of all of the money you make after your first $3,000 earned. Now, if you're just starting out and you're just doing this 100% as a hobby and you're never going to make money, obviously free isn't that big of a deal. But the more successful your game gets, the better of a deal free becomes. So giving away 5% of $200,000 and then giving away 5% of $400,000, well, if you're giving away 0% of $400,000, Godot is definitely the winner over Unreal in that particular scenario. So free is definitely a big side of the coin. Now, the other side of the exact same coin is free again. This time we're talking free as in freedom. And this is the open source nature of the Godot game engine. Godot is free in regards to price tag and licensing, being available under the MIT open source license. Unity trails in this regard, so of the three engines in terms of source code access, Unity sucks the most. You basically get access to some of the modules, some of their new examples, and some of the code for reference, but you can't build Unity yourself, and the only way you're going to get access to the source code is through a rather expensive and negotiated source code license. So if you want to make changes to Unity, you can't. You need to fix a bug, you can't. So that is definitely a limitation of Unity. Unreal is a bit better in this regard, actually a ton better in this regard. You can build Unreal Engine from scratch. The code is hosted up on GitHub. So if you want to make changes, you want to make your own version, and you find a bug and you fix it, so on, you can do so in Unreal Engine. Although it is proprietary and the license behind that is proprietary and does limit you in what you can do. And even if you build from source, you're still paying that 5% royalty, but there's definitely more open source flexibility when it comes to Unreal over Unity. So another thing in Unity's favor, it is also by far the smallest code base out there. So if you actually wanted to contribute to it, contributing to Unity is literally impossible, but trying to contribute to Unreal Engine has a bit of a massive learning curve. The code base is gigantic, and you need to jump through and understand a ton of it to make sense of things. In the case of Godot, if you know C or C++, you could probably contribute to the Godot game engine. It's not really that hard to figure out and learn, and it's quite modular in the way that it's working. So if you want to contribute to a certain part of it, if you're not working on, say, the renderer or something like that, you could probably work in your own little bubble and make code contributions. So that's one of the other nice things about its source code. It's a smaller engine than both of those two, so you can actually get in there and contribute. Okay, so the next point we have is language flexibility. Now this is a little weird because Unity actually over time has been removing language support. Once upon a time, there was GDScript, which is basically JavaScript, and Boo, which is like a Python version-ish thing. And they removed both of them. So now all you've got is C#. Now the nice thing is now that Mono is free and open source, they're actually using a version of C# from this decade, but it is really the only option in town. Now they are developing a visual script scripting language for Unity, but it's a ways off. Now, when you come to Unreal, you've got C++, and the cool thing is they use a tool called Live++ to make the C++ work a lot like a scripting language, so you can, you don't have to do a full link build cycle to check your code out and that kind of stuff. But really, you've got C++ and you've got Blueprints. Now, Blueprints is a visual programming language, and it is, in my humble opinion, the visual programming language. It is the best option out there of all of the various different game engine visual programming language, and every game engine is working towards having a visual programming language. It's just, in the case of Unreal Engine, it was designed from day one of Unreal Engine 4's release to be kind of the way that gameplay is done, and it is by far the best experience, and again, in my opinion. Now, when it comes to Godot, they have a visual programming language as well. It's pretty terrible. I can't think of a single reason to use it as it stands right now, but fortunately, Godot has a number of other options here. So first off, you've got GDScript, a Python-light kind of scripting language. It's very easy to learn. It's kind of thing you can pick up over a weekend easily, and if you've got some prior Python experience, you can basically just start coding without even learning the language. But on top of that, you've got other options. So you've got C++. The game engine itself is written in C++, but you could also do your own game logic in modular form using C++. It's not really ideal, to be honest, so I would mostly stick to other languages than C++ for your game logic, but technically you can do it. On top of that, you can also use C#. Now, C# is getting better and better support. With 3.2, it's basically on every platform that matters except for iOS. Once iOS is there, it's pretty much a first-class language, so if you want to work in C# in Godot, that is pretty much like the new star feature that's being added, and it is definitely a first-class language support. But language flexibility doesn't really end there when it comes to Godot. On top of that, you've also got things like GD Native. And GD Native is the ability to create kind of DLL loading on the fly, so you can link your native code using GD Native, but you don't have to completely rebuild the Godot engine itself. It's this narrow interface bridge, and using it, you can then integrate almost any other kind of programming language you wanted out there, or any other C++ code. You wanted to bring in a different physics engine or something, you could hook it up via GD Native, and you just kind of deal with your bindings. It's built separately. It's built as a plugin to Godot. It's not actually requiring you to completely rebuild Godot. And if you want to go one step lower level, you can actually create modules in Godot. Basically, think of this as straight out plugins, but they have 100% access to the underlying API. So any C++ class that's available in Godot is available in modules. So you've got a lot of language options when it comes to working with the Godot engine. And so if you find yourself needing to do some performant code, write it in a module form, right? C++, write it native code, and you're good to go. You want to link in some existing C code or C++ code, use GD Native, do a quick binding, and boom, you're off to the races. And in fact, GDScript itself is actually implemented as a module. So you could modify GDScript very easily itself, or you could create your own scripting language pretty much just by cloning what GDScript does. So in terms of the language support, I would actually say that this is definitely a strength of the Godot engine. Now, they all have options on their marketplaces. I'm not really taking their marketplace into account in this scenario. This is all stuff that is supported by the core team. Next up, we come into ease of use. Now, this one is incredibly subjective, but when it comes to games, especially 2D games, I find that the ease of use with the Godot is by far and away the highest of the three. Now, when it comes to 2D, Unreal Engine kind of gave up. No, don't get me wrong. 2D games are created using Unreal Engine, but anybody doing that, they're rolling everything themselves. So you're creating it basically using a 3D game engine, and all the 2D stuff is on you to create. Now, they were really heavily focused on this when 4 launched. They had something called Paper 2D, and then I don't think Paper has been updated in about 17 versions now. So you can effectively consider Paper to be pretty much dead, at least from Epic's perspective. Apparently, there's a third-party community working on making Paper a thing again, but for the most part, 2D support in the world of Unreal Engine has always been And then when we come over to Unity, well, Unity has focused heavily the last 2 or 3 years on 2D game development. And there are a ton of games out there that are built using Unity for 2D. So no doubt it is capable of it. But this is a 3D engine with the 2D stuff kind of built on top of it. And then on top of that, a lot of the 2D stuff that you're seeing come out with the newer releases is modular based. And that's great. But that also is hell, because there's something called, dependency hell that you start getting into. And if you really want to take advantage of some of the newest features, it can create a challenge for you. Where you're dealing with things in Godot, you got everything you need to work with 2D out of the box. You can work with literal pixel coordinates. You don't need to deal with, it's fully abstracted away the 3D aspect. Now, you can mix 2D and 3D, but it's just not there. So, you want a sprite, drag a sprite onto the game. It's got a pixel level camera, so you just pop the camera in and you're good to go. So it fakes 2D very well for you. So I would honestly say, and again, this is subjective, but I would say of all the game engines out there, especially when it comes to 2D, I would say GDScript is the easiest of the languages to learn between GDScript, C#, Blueprints, or C++. And I would say that the editor and development experience is actually easiest in 2D when you get in with the Godot engine. Next up, this one is a very short one, but it's tiny. So this is really appealing to some people, and I can get the appeal of this. If you want to install Unreal Engine, you've got to install the Epic Games Launcher and then install a version of Unreal, which I think is about 6 gigabytes right now. And if you want to install Unity, you need to, I'm not 100% certain if they're forcing you to, but it's getting closer and closer to a requirement, install the Unity hub, and then you install a version of Unity. Now, a stripped down version of Unity, I think, is about 1.5 gigabytes, and then you start stocking various different platform support and so on. You're looking at 3 or 4 gigabytes per install very, very quickly. With Godot, you download either the mono version or the C# version or not, which increases the size by 10 megabytes. So you're either picking a 50 megabyte install or a 60 megabyte install. There is no launcher, there is no platform, there's no nothing else. You literally download the zip, extract it out, and run the executable, and you've got Godot on your system. So if you're working on a constrained device, or you want to have your development environment on a flash drive or something like that, this is where Unity really shines. Now, there still are the templates for the various different platforms, but even with those installed, that's say another 100 megabytes. So you're looking at quite literally 1/6 the size of Unity at the very, very smallest. And in practical cases, you're looking more like 1/100th the size of Unity and Unreal Engine. So it is absolutely tiny. And for people that love that kind of stuff, well, I can see why they would like that. And then this one is kind of more general or universal. Hey, you may like it better. Each game engine is using a slightly different approach to how you build your world. Everything is pretty much a scene of nodes with stuff in it. There's composition based. Everything has some kind of a component. Unity right now is going through a revolution or a reinvention where they're moving towards a pure ECS approach. But until then, basically, it was components of entities with components, and you kind of have a very similar thing. It's actors or whatever when you're talking in the Unreal world, and in the Godot world, it's nodes. Everything is a node. Everything, including the scene. The scene is a node. So you've got the concept of prefabs that were just added to Unity 3 versions or 4 versions ago. That is kind of core to the world of Godot. If you like the concept of nodes and everything being a node and scenes being trees of nodes and nodes being savable and instantiatable in other nodes, you're going to love Godot. If you don't like nodes, you're not going to love Godot. But really, it kind of boils down to they all have their slightly different workflow. You may like GDScript, you may despise GDScript. You may like C#, and if you like C#, well, eventually Godot could be a good option, but right now, Unity is probably the best choice there. And if you want a visual programming language, hands down, you probably want to go with Blueprints, at least for now. So each one has their own strengths and weaknesses and desirability and so on, and you kind of almost have to try it to see it, because it's very, very possible you could download Godot, start developing with it, and hate the architecture. It's just the way it is. It's a design decision that they have chose. At the same time, and this is going to be funny, I think it's going to happen with Unity, is the people that love the mono behavior component kind of idea now that they've got with the existing Unity, I think they're going to despise entity component systems. So you're going to have a weird fragmentation going on there. And then my beef against Unreal Engine has always kind of been the same thing. When I'm dealing with Unreal Engine code, it always feels like I'm modding a first-person or third-person shooter game. So if you're working with a genre outside of those, you're fighting the code base a bit. It does seem like things like actors and pawns and the structure and the way that code is developed in Unreal Engine, it does kind of it shows its roots with the way you're working. So, each one is going to definitely have a strengths and weakness. And if you're working on a first or third person shooter, that's actually in its favor, right? So that code will fit that genre of game very nicely. But if you're trying to make something more generalized, like a procedural RPG style game, may not be the best approach in the end. So the last category there basically boils down to, you may like Godot the best because you like Godot the best. It's kind of dumb, but it's true. Some people like certain styles, some people don't. You kind of got to get your hands dirty to decide which ones. And then finally, we're going to get into one last category here, and this is not why you would pick up Godot. I've been saying nothing but roses about Godot so far in this video, but there's definitely reasons why Godot isn't the right choice. Like I said to start this video, anyone that tells you that X is better than Y without a qualifier, they're an idiot. And this is kind of where it comes down to. There are shades of gray, there are different needs, there are different requirements, and there are areas where Godot doesn't shine, and we'll go through them right now. Now, the first one is performance. Now, there are some complaints about GDScript's performance, and I get that, and it could definitely be improved. And at the same time, and you haven't heard me mention 3D very much here, and yeah, so it boils down, I would say it goes, Unreal Engine has the best 3D rendering. Unity is improving definitely with like HDRP and LWRP, or Universal Render Pipeline, or whatever the hell they're calling it now. But even its out-of-the-box render probably would have put it number 2, and then Godot would be number 3. Now, Godot is getting all kinds of love in the rendering side of things when it comes to Godot 4, but we're not talking about what Godot is going to be, we're talking about what Godot is right now. And what Godot is right now is lagging behind graphically, especially in the world of 3D. So we've got some performance issues. We could definitely, people point out that a lack of scene culling is a performance limitation, and we're waiting on the Vulkan renderer to come through. So in this area, performance is definitely one of the areas where Godot struggles. Now, not in the 2D world, very much less so there, but if you're doing a really AAA style 3D game, you're going to struggle with Godot performance-wise. Now, the next category is platforms, and this is part of where the MIT license of Godot is a double-edged sword. Both Unity and Godot, Unity and Unreal support every single platform under the sun, and the reason behind that is basically, if someone like Nintendo or a VR headset manufacturer like HTC are working on a new product, they work with Unity and Unreal Engine right from day one. So when these products launch, generally they're compatible with the two major engines day one. It's just the nature of the beast. And Godot doesn't have that level of hardware access. Basically, they got to wait for the product to come to market, and then someone in the community has to go and run with it. So you're not going to see day one support for a lot of this hardware like you would. Hopefully, we start seeing manufacturers work more closely with Godot in the future for better support there. But as it stands today, you're almost always going to be beat to market by Unity and Unreal Engine. Now, on top of that, and I mentioned earlier on, the limitations of the MIT license, MIT, or open source in general, and closed source proprietary NDA-packed developer console licenses are not really that friendly to each other. So in order to build a game for the Sony PlayStation or the Nintendo Switch or Microsoft not using UWP, you need to sign a dev kit license directly with those manufacturers. So right now, even though Godot has been ported to run on various different console platforms, it's on a closed and proprietary basis. So you're not going to see PlayStation or Xbox integration out of the box from Godot anytime soon, because that just isn't really that compatible with the open source way of doing things. And that's as much on the console manufacturers as it is on the Godot engine. But don't worry on the level that if you do make a game that could be made for consoles, the skill and ability to do so is already out there. It's just not something that is there out of the box, and it probably never will be. The next point of negative for the Godot engine is the ecosystem. Now, I don't mean this as a slight in any way. The Godot ecosystem is good. The community itself is absolutely passionate, we'll go with. It's quite large, so you can get good support. There are a handful of books out there. There are some excellent tutorials out there. So definitely there is a good ecosystem built around Godot. But when it comes to comparing it against Unreal Engine and Unity, it's not even close. So when I'm talking ecosystem, I'm talking not just the users, but the communities, the forums, the books available, the marketplaces or asset stores, or so on, training courses, professional training, all that kind of stuff, conferences, everything like that. I bet you that Unity employs at least 100 developer evangelists. So you got an idea of just the scope that you're dealing with here. The ecosystem for, I would say Unity is the winner here, followed by Unreal, followed by Godot. Godot has an asset store, but it's tiny compared to both those, and completely free, which is definitely an upside. But it's just a matter of scale. So if you're looking for assets, you're not going to beat Unity just for the sheer volume of what's out there. If you're looking for materials, you want to go down to your local bookstore if you still have a local bookstore, or you head to Amazon if you don't. You're going to find maybe 300 books on Unity, where you might find 3 on Godot. The ecosystems are just gigantic, and that's a valuable thing for any game engine to have. And then the next part, to be honest, this is part of ecosystem, but I'll put this separately. And this really kind of depends on what you're in it for and why you are developing games. If you're developing games as a passion project, completely ignore this one. If you're developing games because you're going to develop and release them yourself, ignore this point as well. But if you are developing games because A, you want to get a job in the game industry, or B, you're developing games and you want to recruit people to work with you, well then this matters. This is the resume factor. Now when you are looking for people with experience, or when you see a job listing, it will say Unity experience or Unreal Engine experience a plus or required or whatever. Very rarely do you see this for Godot. So if you're looking for a project, if you contribute to a project, if it's a smart hirer, they won't really care that much. You know, if they see that you've shipped a game, they'll be impressed by that, and generally that's the requirement. But a lot of times when you're applying, especially to a larger or a mid-sized company, you're going through the HR layer, and they're going to have a bullet point of features they are looking for, and quite often that feature on the resume is going to be something like Unity experience. So if you're looking to do your game project as a CV builder, you're probably better going with either Unity or Unreal Engine. Probably Unity in the biggest scheme. And then finally, this is the last one. As with many open source projects, it is heavily dependent on 1 or 2 key developers. I'd say there's mostly one person, Juan. If he decided to leave, Godot would be in trouble. Now, I don't think it would go away. It's an open source project. Anyone can go in there and pick up the pieces and run with it. But he's writing the core level stuff. He's writing the renderers right now. He's kind of the key developer. Sort of like what happened to IdTech when John Carmack left. When you've got a smallish team working on technology and one of those key people leaves, you're in trouble. Now, I don't think there's any reason to guess that he's going to leave. There's no intention there, but it is definitely a risk factor when you look at something like Godot. It could lose a lot of momentum overnight if they lost key developers. Whereas if you got something like Unity or Unreal, you probably have hundreds or possibly even thousands of people that work there. And if the graphics programmer leaves, yeah, it might be a bit of a setback, but they've got probably 3 people trained under him that know already what he does or she does. And you just slot in a replacement. I hate to make it sound that bad. Like if you're at Unity or Unreal Engine, you know, your contributions are still definitely appreciated, but you are more of a cog in the machine, and that machine can function without you. And that's kind of a fragility when it comes to open source projects that aren't, you know, Linux kernel or MySQL sized. If you lose key developers, so that's it. That is pretty much the reasons why, if you say, I can get a hold of Unreal or I can get a hold of Unity for free, why would I bother with Godot? Those are the reasons why I would. And then to finish things off, the reasons why I wouldn't. Now, if I missed anything, if I missed something, you know, not really small, I didn't get into like details of like skeletal animation or, you know, level streaming over networks or, you know, that kind of stuff. So I didn't want to get into the weeds on features or functions. And most of the game engines out there do most of what you require. So it's not really a big point. But if there's something here, especially at the macro level, that I missed either as a strength or a weakness, I'd love to hear it in the comments down below. And hopefully that was useful to some of you people trying to decide if Godot is right or wrong for you. If it's looking at it, and after seeing this list, I say the next big suggestion is pick it up. It's a 50 megabyte download. Give it a shot. See if you like the way it is architected. See if you like the node-based approach. See if you like GDScript or the C# bindings. And if you do, hey, it's a great choice. If you don't, hey, there's a couple of great alternatives out there. Actually, there's dozens. So, and also stay tuned. I will do that Unity versus Unreal Engine comparison. I've actually covered quite a bit of it in this video by accident, but stay tuned for that. All right, that's it. Talk to you all later. Goodbye.